Okay, so let me see. Okay. Okay, hi everyone. So we are going to introduce ourselves. And in this, what we thought we should do is we should say our name and where we are. So that can be what school or group you're affiliated with, or place you work, and where in the world you are, so that we can have a global sense of where we are. My name is Clarissa Sorensen-Unruh, and I am at Central New Mexico Community College in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And I'm the virtual buddy, at least one of them, for this particular session. Okay. With the folks who are, oh, and we're coming from, oh, thank you, Maha. This is very helpful. We're coming from T3 at St. Norbert in De Pere. Whew, did I say it all, guys? I hope so. All right, so we're gonna start by introducing, let's introduce actually the folks who are virtual first and end with the on-site, because then you guys can get some conversation started. Does that sound okay with everyone? Okay, all right, why don't you go first, Greg, since you're first on my mom.
Okay, cool. My name is Greg Dillon, and I'm from the Boston area. Robin, loved your keynote. Good to see you. Great job.
Go ahead, Karen. I put it in the side chat there. Who's the order?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, Karen, okay. Sorry, I didn't see that. I am Karen Cangelosi in Keene, New Hampshire in the United States.
Awesome.
Marisol?
All right, Marisol, it's you.
Okay. I'm Marisol, Universidad de Guadalajara, University of Guadalajara, Mexico.
And I'm Nate Angell, calling from sunny Portland, Oregon for the first time. I work with Hypothesis, the nonprofit open source annotation technology organization.
I'm Scott Robinson, also calling from sunny Portland, Oregon. I'm at Portland State University.
Cool. All right, Teresa.
Hi, I'm Teresa McKinnon. I'm in the UK, which is also sunny today, which, you know, must be said. I'm at the University of Warwick in Central Midlands area of the UK.
Great. Maha?
Hi, I'm Maha from Cairo, Egypt, and I'm here just to say hi to Krissy and Robin and Joe, but I have to go because it's time for us to eat. But I'll watch you on YouTube, and I watched part of your keynote, and I'm looking forward to watching the rest. Bye.
Okay, bye. Maha.
Good morning. Like Marisol, I'm here in Guadalajara, actually in Zapopan, in the Zona Metropolitana. And I work at the Tecnológico de Monterrey, and looking forward to this.
All right. Okay, on-site folks, it's all you.
Hi, I'm Krissy Lukens. I am from St. Norbert College here in De Pere, Wisconsin. And I'm Robin DeRosa from Plymouth State University in New Hampshire, but here in the home, apparently, of the Green Bay Packers. So they call me over again.
Nice.
And I'm Joe Murphy. I'm from Kenyon College in Gambier, Ohio, which I guess would have been about a 10-hour drive, but instead it was about a 12-hour flight. So it was a day.
That is, wow. Wow, that is a lot. Okay. All right. So do you guys start off the conversation? Those of you who are on site, you want to talk about the keynote, maybe a quick review for those who haven't actually watched it in advance, and then what you guys felt like you got out of it, what the feel was at the actual site.
Sure. So the Cliff Notes version, or maybe the behind the scenes version, is that when Audrey Waters pulled the Creative Commons licenses off of her work, I had been using her work really a lot in some OERs that I build with my students. And I wasn't really sure of the protocols about what to do when the licenses changed. And I was also interested in us taking sort of the barometric pressure of open in light of some of the reasons that Audrey gave in her newest piece for switching her licensing and really foregrounding some of the problems with working in the open. So what I wanted to do in the keynote was to show how domain of one's own and open pedagogy approaches with students had sort of transformed my practices, but also how some of the critical problems with open that continually sort of raise their heads in the work that I do, how those are guiding me to maybe reframe my overall conceptual vision for why we want to work with the web and what kind of web we want to work with, and what the role is of involving our students in redesigning the web for a more commons-based kind of teaching, learning, knowledge transmission, communication, that kind of stuff. So I was looking at domain of one's own and open pedagogical practice, and also aspirational definitions for the future of the web, I'd say. And most of you down below there were quoted in many ways, but drawing, I think, a lot on some of the key leadership in open that have been pushing back on the concept of open in general. That's what I got.
So you mentioned some ideas behind students' reaction to being open. You talked about the point that, oh, bring your credit cards, kids, so we can sign up for our blogging. But I've seen more pushback from my students lately about that open's not always good, and we've talked about this a lot lately. And what were the thoughts of other people there in terms of resistance to being open?
You know, we didn't talk about that so much in the Q&A, Ken, but I want to highlight some work that you did a ways back, I think mostly on Facebook, and I'm not sure, you know, what communities were participating in that conversation, but you talked about sort of transforming one of your courses to kind of an open pedagogy model, which was not just about being open and sharing, but also learner-directed and sort of learner-driven curriculum, and the pushback that you received that semester from students. And I want to honor that. I see it less and less, probably because I used to get it a lot, and so I had to develop sort of ways of dealing with it. But one of the things I think when I get pushback about particularly learner-driven approaches to learning, so asking students to participate in the creation of learning outcomes or to create syllabi with me or any of that stuff, when I see pushback to that, a lot of times it's that sort of model of, you know, I am paying you to give me knowledge that I actually need in order to get a job. And the thing about that critique that they are, you know, pushing back against my pedagogy for is, like, they are right. They're paying a lot. They can't afford it. They need it to get things like the wage bump that comes with the credential of higher education. And that whole transaction model of learning that's focused around the private market value of a diploma drives pedagogy so intensely that when I see that from students, it just reminds me that they are not the problem. The problem is the compliance-oriented model of education and the way that college right now is being redefined as a private market you know, good, a private good rather than a public good. So usually when I see that from them, the most important thing is to try to kind of resist the defensiveness, because the attack is less on the pedagogy than it is on the structures that I'm actually trying to.
And I think you hit it there, Robin, is we're not the only stakeholders, the student and us. There's the administration, there's the people in charge of scholarships, and there's the people in charge of going to international programs, and my grades are important, and all of these other factors aren't involved in our little bubble that we're experimenting in, I think. And we noticed that a lot this semester.
And one of the things that it reminded me of when you were talking about the student getting the information to make a choice about whether to participate in a particular zone, about whether to whether to leave material up or take it down. I think that's a huge challenge to us, and particularly it's a challenge kind of to the open narrative. And I apologize for telling a story, but I'm going to. I went looking recently for a podcast series that one of our classes did. It's been taken down. And it's too bad because it was really neat work, and I think it was pedagogically useful in terms of talking about some of the ways that we structured the assignment. It was also somewhat irreverent. It was not high quality media production. And I can see a lot of reasons why people might have made the choice. And actually, I'm kind of wondering in a team project who made the choice that said, okay, we did a thing, we released it, we told people, and now it's done and it's gone, and we're going to take it away. And in a way, I think this connects to your Alcatraz slide about the LMS isn't merely a walled garden. But I think it's a similar thing, that there's a very interesting privilege we assert when we say, you're going to make this great stuff and I'm going to use it forever. And I think we're going to have to grapple with that one even a little harder about that's the nature of things. And I was trained as a librarian. The nature of things being that information sometimes disappears is difficult to accept some days. But I think it's some place we're going to get to if we're serious about this being an open pedagogy and not merely the extractive creation of unique resources.
And that was the gift to me of Audrey delicensing her work, which when I first saw it just hit me like a punch in the stomach, honestly, because I use it, and also it made me feel better about open in a lot of ways. But when she took it away, I started realizing, wow, I really need to think about the act of consent and sharing, and figure out how this privacy still works for me with my librarian's heart, you know, right? Like this kind of privacy feeds open. How can I get my mind around that? So I'm grateful, not so much that she changed her license, but again, she kind of provoked that question for me. It's hard though.
How about you, Krissy? What did you have? What did you think about everything that went on today?
Well, I love the new word that Robin introduced me to, and I sometimes forgot it all.
Bricolage.
Bricolage.
She loves bricolage.
Oh, to me, that just embodies everything that we're wanting our students to do in terms of building the infrastructure or having, you know, a role in that. And it's not just them contributing or giving back in terms of their fields that they're studying, but just, you know, making the learning and the knowledge and the new ways of creating and thinking that they're coming up with accessible and available to all. So that to me was just kind of the big takeaway and something I could really relate to.
You see the chat, they're like, Rico, what are you saying? Right? Bricolage is a term that I borrowed from Derrida, which is probably the most pretentious thing I'll ever say in a connecting session. But it's the idea of, as opposed to, Derrida uses it to contrast with engineering, right? Which is like building solid structures, sort of mathematically balanced structures that you can rest on. Bricolage is a playful act that takes whatever broken and discarded tools you have around you to build something new. And so the idea was, could we take the broken sort of the corrupt web in some ways and use its parts in a subversive or even playful way to aspire or iterate towards something new.
And I don't know, it's just timely because for any of you that are familiar with Destination Imagination, it just reminded me so much of that. And that is, right? You know, and that's the global Destination Imagination tournament is taking place this week, I think. So it's, I see students that participate in that and know that our students coming up at the college level that can carry on that same spirit, that spirit. So I see that too.
Yeah, bricolage, all the things.
Yeah, Robin, I actually took your idea of bricolage as a kind of a promising way to look forward, so that you know, in this world where things are so fraught, that we might be able to do something of value with students and ourselves, especially if we are able to help them walk away with a kind of bricoleurs attitude toward things too, where they understand that things are broken, things can be made playful, things can be taken in directions that they weren't designed for, rather than trying to assume that we're inserting them into a working engineered system that somehow benefits them. So if they can walk away with that kind of attitude toward the web and toward life in general, probably, it seems like then we're probably doing at least the job I would think I would want to do.
Yeah, I wanted to add, I love the idea of thinking about the fact that students are doing this, or we need to teach our students how to think about this in subversive ways, because that is what we're talking about. Like, yes, I'm teaching this class and you have these sorts of assignments and goals that you have to meet, but in fact, what we're trying to get them to do is to think about reconstructing the web, or like you talked about, having this web be this place of freedom, but that it has to be a very subversive way that we're sort of teaching here and here. Like, what is the undertone that we're actually trying to get our students to be able to do, so that they can construct the web in the ideal way that we want it to be, even though we have these layers of institutional trappings above us. So.
And maybe in that sense, it's helpful that we don't know what that web looks like, right? That I can't answer that question, because I think that's less about some of the hoop jumping fake empowerment that we bestow on children, right? Like,
yeah,
this e-port belongs to you. Here you go. And stuff, to a certain degree, they're like training wheels. But the real question is, you know, what are we making here? And I don't actually know the answer. And I feel like that's potentially powerful, that we're not prescribing something as much as we're seeding or asking.
Yeah. Say, you figure it out. Yeah.
Please.
Well, my thought idea is also that it seems to me that we won't ever know the answer, because it's always morphing and changing and becoming something new and something that's defined by what we need at that time, for that particular place, for that group of students, and so on and so forth. So I was wondering where the thoughts of contextual context and transferability, and how to make all of that work between the open education that's available and how we would use it. What are your thoughts on that, Robin?
Well, so some of the folks that I was quoting today are the folks who are really interested in context. Mahabali in particular has really helped me think about OERs, for example, as not only that it's not about the artifact, but that there is no artifact when decontextualized. So everything, and again, you know, I'm trained as a post-structuralist in literary philosophical theory, right? So that's really what a lot of stuff is that I'm talking about here, is that the meaning is being made by how these things interact with their environments. And that's part of the reason why I love the 5 R's, that sense that everything is always already iterative and dynamic. But it's also one of the reasons why I really bristle against OERs as artifacts, or focusing on textbooks, for example, or objects, because when you transfer from different places, you know, this is why I just don't understand that sometimes people in open are kind of the anti-print on demand, right? Like, you're going to really cheapen these materials, like the power of the open, if you print them out. But it depends where you are and who you're working with. And the more I listen to actual real humans, the more dynamic open becomes for me, and the less committed I become to using any particular artifact in any particular way. And I think that's really the power of open, is in making dynamic context the key to what you look at when you're developing pedagogy, rather than focusing on, look, I made this book. I run into this a little bit with like the own OERs that I make regularly with students, because my librarians, God love them, hello, Kristen, are always trying to archive them in the open access repository. But I don't like it, because when they go to live there, they become static objects. And I like my stuff to be constantly moving on the web. And when people ask me to use my stuff, a lot of times I'm more interested in, are you sure you want to use my stuff in your, place? Or do we need to think more about your place and how it's going to change my stuff, right? So I love that whole conversation.
Okay. Sorry, about 2 minutes. I think so it's different when it's in a public university, because my students, they're not a problem for share everything they do it. And they do a little research and they like it to share, and they don't have a problem for the open all the information. I think so the problem is our teachers, because they not trust about the ethical issues, about you give it all your resource, and they're not really sure about start to use an open resources or give it all for free. Plus, we need here our wages for a teacher is really low in a public university. So you need to do some application for get more money. So you need to research, you need to write, you need to have a book printed with a code, what is ISBN code. And if you know go that code, is not recognized for our government, so you cannot get more money. So I think so it's so difficult talking the same way for open be for a private university. And I think so my students, they're very, very happy for share and give it all, and they show how hard it was the work. And I don't know what they think, what we can do. We start just take courses and be in Agora, working with Tanis, Brian, Alan, and you also. We start to change that, but it's little small step, because our university is so big. We are 200,000 teachers or students and 20,000 teachers. So it's a big university. So how we can change that?
Yeah, I mean, one of the first things I would say is that, faculty who don't want to share usually have some interesting reasons that we should listen to. So, for example, one thing I've been interested in is like, I'm going to share all my teaching materials. And as we see increasing moves by institutions to automate teaching, what's going to keep somebody from taking all of my good stuff and using that to kind of write professors out of the equation? This is not consistent with anything that we believe about how open pedagogy works, but I've definitely been interested in Scott Robinson is down below there in the queue, about open washing and the way that corporate companies, or we might even think of for-profit institutions, can take the good work of the commons and monetize it so effectively that people would actually prefer to pay money for it rather than to get it for free. So I think people being worried about being co-opted is not silly. I also think that impact factor is broken in institutions. We need to do more work inside of institutions with promotion and tenure and all of hiring to fix the own broken way that we acknowledge what counts as real work in the academy. And right now we push a lot of that onto contingent labor. We call it service. And it doesn't actually get valued as academic labor. So when I hear kind of naysayers poo-pooing open, I try to take it seriously, because in my own institution, sometimes I felt like when I'm being critical, I get seen as kind of an obstructionist. But these critiques are really important, and I would prefer to foreground them and deal with them rather than pretend that they're not real, because a lot of what you just said, they are real, real problems. The fact also that OER is, it's not centralized, it's not organized. Like, these are things I love. The distributed web is messy. There's a little bit more autonomy in individual places. I like that. But at the same time, it's hard to have kind of cultural collateral working in the, the distributed mess that is open right now. And so I can understand, faculty can't find stuff, they can't use stuff, they don't know the processes for making stuff, how do you fund stuff? Everybody's kind of hacking that together on their own right now, which makes the work doubly hard. So yeah, I didn't answer any of your questions, but they're good.
So how are we, just to ask real quick, sorry to interrupt, I didn't mean to interrupt too much, but just to make sure we're all good on time, are you guys still available for a little bit longer, or do you need to go?
We're good. So you want to go a few more minutes? We're good. I don't want to force. Yeah,
that'd be great. I just want to make sure. I want to be full of time because Ken's telling me to. So.
In on that, Rissa. I was thinking the same thing. I was just wondering if you guys are feeling burnt out or anything. But yeah, if we're good, then we can keep going for a couple more minutes. We have lunch at noon. It's 11:30 right now. So maybe just a little bit, maybe a little bit more talk, but then maybe a little bit of downtime before lunch would be good.
Yeah, let's just do another 5 minutes if people got questions or whatever.
Okay.
I'll jump in if I can. Robin, one of the quotes from your keynote that really hit me in the feels was the bit you're talking about LMSs and a student saying something about meaningless engagement with the work we produce. That really got me, because when you're creating designing a course, like, we often think about engaging as a buzzword. We want it to create an engaging course, but it could be possible that we create something engaging and it's still meaningless to the students. And that really hit me in the heartstrings. I'm wondering, with the domain of one's own, did you find that there was less of that with your students, that they found that the work that they were doing was meaningful in addition to engaging?
Yeah, definitely times a million for sure. At the same time, I was able to amplify that the more I backed off the sort of requirements of moving online, building a PLN in these 17 DeRosa ways that I have for you. The more I backed off, the better. But I should also say that it's very helpful that I have a program rather than a course. So when I've done this in one-off courses, like teaching freshman writing or a first-year seminar, that's been much more challenging than what I have now most of the time with my students, which is kind of a longer range interaction. So we spend a lot of time talking about what it means to own your own education. We really mine that question as a group, which allows them to make decisions about how they move online in productive ways. I'll give you an example. The final exam that I give in the introductory course in our program, they come in, they watch a video, and they write for a couple of hours using ideas from the course to respond to this video. And then at the end, they come up with their paper to turn it in, and I rustle around and make it confusing so that no one sees this, but I just staple a letter to their paper that says, you don't need me to read this. It's not for me, it's for you. If you have something to say at the end of this course, go out and say it in the communities that matter, and I'll find you there. And if I did that in a one-off course, students would fume, right? Because they spent all this time
working so hard and now you're not even going to read it. It's like the worst example of professorialism ever, right? But in that course, they're like, exactly, okay, gotcha, right? And that's because we spent a lot of time laying the seeds. So I don't think you can just do this stuff as tricks, like easy tricks to engage your students. It has to really be part of a larger set of questions that you make open and accessible to them. And I found it much harder to do this on a course level than I have at a program level. So if you're in a standard academic department, if you've got colleagues who are willing to share some of this with you, I think it helps a lot. But yeah, the students, they post on their ePorts, you know, off assignments, right? They're using them for other classes that they're in, it's been truly, it really has been transformative to what we do. But
so the work kind of becomes a portfolio for them, something they can actually use in their life.
Yeah, and for a lot of them, it really is very traditionally portfolio-esque. You know, they've got like, hello, I'm whoever. And they've got their CV, and they've got, you know, at the end of the semester, they curate and they take out the stuff that they just wrote because they kind of had to, right? And they put their best stuff forward. And for other students, it's a much messier spot, but a lot of that has to do with their fields, right? The ePort of a sculptor looks very different than a digital humanist, which looks different than an occupational therapist. And I think they really enjoy figuring out what they're all about personally, but also what their academic and professional work is like. And I think that's cool too, because we want to think of our students as scholars and colleagues. And the ePorts for us have really allowed them to own that identity, I think, a little bit more.
So I have a question for you as a follow-up to this most recent conversation. I guess a question for all of those participating as well. If you've had experience with this, what is the best way to cultivate that notion with our students and our colleagues as well, and even ourselves, in terms of using the web as not holding back and only posting our finished product, but really kind of just working openly and draft modes and work in progress. You know, I find myself, even, nope, I'm not ready to post yet because it's not done, but just getting over that hump. So you're saying you've seen that with some students more so depending on their discipline?
Well, yeah, and I get asked all the time, like, what about the bad work your students put on the internet, right? And the project that probably people are most familiar with that I did for OER was when our class created the Open Anthology of Early American Literature. And this book has transformed so many things, right? Not only my life, but for academic publishing, as that book has been taken and forked and is now going to replace a ton of commercial anthologies. But the first version that we made was not only not very good, there was actually some really embarrassing problems with it, particularly in the section on Native American oral tradition, which comes first in the course, and the students are least theoretically sophisticated. And they wrote a series of introductions that I would say are very problematic. I would not politically support them. And their names are on them. And I thought, gosh, they don't even know what's wrong with this yet. Like they don't understand that it's grammatically correct, but it's colonialist and, offensive, right? So what I tried to do was to build an infrastructure where they were recognized as students who were learning, and where we asked the Commons to help us fix it, and which is really what's happened with that anthology. And it took me a long time to figure this out in my own work. When I would have collaborators, I would spend a lot of time working offline to get my stuff perfect before I showed it to them. And that's why collaboration was like twice as much work in some ways. And now I realize collaboration reduces my burden because I can put what I have out there, and things that I stink at, other people are really good at, and they'll work on. That's the kind of web that I'd like to build, but I think you have to talk about that kind of web with students and help them. That's why I'm also very frank with them when I disagree with stuff that they post, and I, explain that to them, and, everything from comma splices, which, a lot of students will really be mad if you don't help them fix their grammar, because they don't see that and they think they've put this great thing out there. But everything from that to sort of conceptual problems. But I also think helping the web learn to interact with new scholars and young scholars and students is really important. I've had students get slammed for stuff they've posted, mostly because the stuff is so beautiful and so professional looking that people assume that this is some, graduate student or professor. And then when they realize like it's somebody who just learned 2 weeks ago about this topic, they're much more charitable. So I try to encourage people, when you put something out there, frame it. Tell them where you are with the work. Tell them how far along you are. We're trained to kind of think disclaimers are weak, but I love disclaimers. Disclaim all you want. That's an invitation for people to improve. And putting that kind of stuff on the front of our textbooks or on student e-ports can be a nice way. Yeah, on the About Me section, like Ken is saying in the blog, students can do whatever they want, but I think helping their audience understand that they're students. And Kate Bowles and I have talked for a long time about starting a hashtag. We haven't done it because we're tired, but something like, I don't know, hashtag mentor comment or something, where I have a student who writes a really awesome post in, conservation biology. I put some comment on there like, this is cool, I don't really know. But I want some people to come in and engage with her. I want Karen to get on there and start talking. So maybe I could just hashtag it in a certain way, and we'd have a thread open in TweetDeck, which would allow people who want to mentor and nurture and help people who need support in improving their work. We could hashtag that stuff and get that kind of community going, because it's very different when it's your own teacher versus somebody just in the audience. So maybe we'll get that going. The question is it a hashtag on Twitter or WordPress or both? I was thinking mostly in Twitter because that's what I use, but I maybe just a ubiquitous one that you could use in all the places would work. All the things can. But that's the web I'd like to see, right? And that's the interdisciplinarians web as well, right? That's the web that says there's always another perspective. I don't care who you are or how smart you are, that's going to open this to be improved in some way. And if we just build a portfolio web, then what's the point, really? That's like David Wiley, where he always talks about it's like driving an airplane down the freeway, right? Like fly that sucker. Like that's what the web does, right? The web is not a laptop for taking notes to help you regurgitate information, right? It's a connective tool. I'm telling you guys this like you don't know it. You're like, oh, the web's a connective tool. Thanks, Robin. Preach it to the people.
That's awesome. Okay, so it's been about 5 minutes or a little more. And so I was wondering if we had any last questions or if we could wrap it up so that these folks can rest and then go to lunch. Virtual folks?
Just so you know, we will be having a student panel reaction to Robin's keynote at lunch at 12. That'll be starting around 12:30, and that will be live streamed as well. So if you have any questions for the students that were here and watching the keynote, just tweet them out and we can try and ask those during the panel.
Wouldn't it be cool every time after you taught a class, there was like a student panel where you have to be quiet and they got to talk about your class and like what they learned and also how you sucked and all that stuff?
Each 7 Likert scale questions.
Yeah, that's true.
That's horrifying, Robin. Thank you for that.
Right?
That's horrible. All right. Well, thank you so much. And we appreciate everyone being here. And online after these folks go, that's fine if you want to hang out. But I'm going to stop the broadcast pretty quickly. here. Do you last thoughts?
Thanks.
Okay, I'll stop in the
Thank you
back.
so much. Good to see you.
Thank you guys.
Thank
Bye.
you.